A critical diplomatic movement and moment underway right now.
Bro, let's talk about this Trump and Putin meeting because, wow, it's like watching two dudes who definitely know they shouldn't be hanging out, but they're still meeting up at 2 a.m. like, yo, you free? Like, what do they even talk about? Hey man, nice missiles. Thanks bro, love your golf courses. That's the vibe. And the funniest part, everyone's acting like they don't know why people are suspicious. Like, come on, it's Trump and Putin. These two aren't exactly meeting up to talk about their favorite pizza toppings. They're not sitting there debating pineapple on pizza. Nah, they're plotting something. You just know one of them is like so, sanctions, and the other one's like so, elections. And then they both laugh like it's an inside joke. And the way the media covers it is hilarious. One side is like, this is treason. The other side is like, no, this is leadership. And I'm just sitting here like, bro, I don't care what you call it. It looks sketchy. If your homie disappears into a back room with the guy who keeps hacking everyone's emails, you don't just shrug and go, oh yeah, they're probably just playing chess. No, you're like, yo, what's he doing back there? Here's the thing. Trump loves the show. He thrives on the drama. And Putin's that dude who never laughs in public but is probably giggling in private like, this is too easy. He's got that poker face like he's about to sell you a used car and you're gonna thank him for it. Trump's like, we had a great meeting, the best meeting. Everyone's saying it. Meanwhile, nobody knows what was actually said. That's the scariest part. Because think about it, if you and your buddy disappear for 2 hours, no cameras, no microphones, and then you come out smiling like you just hit the jackpot, people are gonna assume you weren't talking about puppies. You weren't discussing the weather. Nah, you're up to something. And with these two, you don't even have to be paranoid. They literally broadcast the weirdness. And here's where it gets wild. People on Twitter lose their minds. Half the country is like, we're doomed. The other half is like, this is genius diplomacy. And I'm like, bro, he literally fist bumped the KGB. That's not diplomacy. That's the trailer for a Netflix documentary. You can already hear the voiceover. In 2025, two leaders met in secret. What they discussed would change history forever. The energy is just insane. On one hand, you've got the world's most unpredictable president. On the other, you've got a guy who wrestles bears for fun. You put them in the same room, and we're supposed to believe it's all normal. Nah, this isn't normal. This is two supervillains meeting at Starbucks. And honestly, the only people who win in this situation are comedians. Because how do you not make jokes about this? It's like Christmas morning for comedy. Trump saying we had a great meeting while Putin smirks in the background is peak awkwardness. That smirk says it all. That's not I respect this man. That's I can't believe he just said that out loud. So yeah, call it diplomacy, call it betrayal, call it whatever. But don't call it boring. Because this is the kind of political theater you couldn't even write if you tried.
At Air Base Elmendorf-Richardson in Alaska, President Trump and Russian leader Putin meeting behind closed doors right this minute. We saw the top of that meeting, the pool spray as it's called. What had been on one-on-one is now a 3-on-3 with top diplomatic aides now joining each of the two leaders. President Trump has said that he thought he would know within 2 minutes whether this meeting with Putin would be a constructive one. He has even said that he could walk out if it's not. The Kremlin, meanwhile, has said that these talks could last at least 6 or 7 hours. Welcome to a special edition of The Arena. I'm Jake Tapper in Anchorage, Alaska, in for Casey Hunt. Let's get back to CNN anchor and chief White House correspondent Caitlin Collins, who is at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson, where the two leaders are meeting with their teams. Caitlin, where exactly are Trump and Putin right now on that airbase?
You know, Jake, what's fascinating, this is obviously a massive military base here, military installation here. And as we came in this morning, we were, shuttled in on buses. But where we're staying is actually quite a small area. There's a press area. This is the room where the press conference is slated to happen later. And just about 100 yards away from me is actually where Trump and Putin are meeting behind closed doors with their respective teams. We're all in the same building right now. They're just down the hallway where that spray was that you saw, where they had the Marco Rubio, Steve Witkoff, and then the Russian delegation seated around Putin as well inside that room. So they're not far from us. And basically everyone is kind of now waiting and watching to see what happens and how long this meeting goes on. Is it as long as the Russians were saying earlier? It's not totally clear. here. Obviously, Putin can be quite long-winded, and so watching this meeting play out, and then they'll break that out into a larger meeting with the delegations and a lunch. And so watching all of that happen is really what's critical here as we're watching this play out from the president himself, as you heard from him inside that spray. I want to read for you, Jake, because it was hard to hear as we were watching that spray play out, but we have a report from the reporter who was in the room who talks about, the questions they shouted at President Putin, basically saying that they asked if he would agree to a ceasefire, if he would agree to stop killing civilians, and how he could be trusted. Those are the shouted questions that were being said there. Putin did not respond, the reporter says, but he did acknowledge, Jake, that he heard those questions from our colleagues over at ABC, who are the pool reporters inside the room. Obviously, that's notable in and of itself, just having reporters shout questions at Putin. Obviously, this happens to Trump on a daily basis, but for Putin himself, and notable for Trump to not respond. Typically, when he has a spray with a world leader, Jake, in the Oval Office or whatnot, sometimes they can go on for 40 minutes to an hour, where the president is answering a slew of questions from the reporters in the room, from both the U.S. delegation and the foreign delegation. He chose this moment not to answer any of those questions as this meeting is getting underway.
All right, Caitlin Collins at Elmendorf Air Base, joined Elmendorf. Richardson, thanks so much. CNN's Kristen Holmes and Jim Sciutto are here with me in Anchorage. We should note, Kristen, the most absent person from the summit is the leader of the country that Putin and Russia invaded, Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine.
Yeah, that's right. And I spoke to a number of White House officials as they were talking about setting up this meeting with Vladimir Putin. And essentially, they gave me the indication that there was no world in which there was not first a bilateral meeting between Trump and Putin before they moved on to this trilateral meeting. Now, they kept the options open to have a meeting as quickly as tomorrow. You heard President Trump say that. That was actually an idea they'd been floating for about a week. I had heard about that a week prior, that they thought if it goes really well, can we get Zelensky in here and have this next meeting? But President Trump wanted to have a sit down with Putin. First of all, Putin, the invitation was just for President Trump to sit down. But Trump also wanted to, look at Putin. Part of the thing about President Trump that we all know is that he believes that his gut instinct is the most reliable instinct. And he does believe that if he sits in a room alone with him and has a conversation, that he can get a sense of whether or not Putin actually wants peace. Now, of course, he's not sitting in a room alone with him. We know now it's a 3-on-3 meeting. But he did feel like he had to have this conversation with just Putin before they brought in Zelensky. And if you talk to administration officials, they defend it by saying there's been several meetings with Zelensky and Trump, with Putin, that nothing's ever gone anywhere. So we needed to have this sit-down meeting. But of course, it's notable because they're sitting here talking about what's going to happen in his country.
And in fact, however much Trump and Zelensky, the U.S. and the Ukrainians might seem, at least potentially, on the same page right now, it was just a few months ago, Jim, that there was that disastrous Oval Office meeting where President Trump and Vice President Vance had words with Zelensky. Let's show a little bit from that meeting in February.
You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having
not
cards.
Playing cards.
Right now, you don't.
You're
playing cards.
Mr. President.
You're playing cards.
Serious.
You're gambling with the lives of
war.
millions of people.
You're
gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's back to you. Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Still uncomfortable months later. Has their relationship improved then since then, you think?
I mean, it's recovered from the abyss, right? I mean, I remember speaking to Ukrainian officials in the wake of that, and it was utter despair, you heard. I mean, they thought the relationship with the U.S. was broken, a relationship that they depend on to a large degree for the survival of their country. There was talk, you remember, there were even very pro-Ukrainian U.S. lawmakers, Lindsey Graham among them, who were suggesting Zelensky's got to go. And there were even Ukrainians quietly questioning whether Zelensky could survive that meeting. And yet, in the span of weeks, he turned it around, right? And I think Zelensky deserves, as does President Trump, but Zelensky credit for rescuing that relationship. The line from that moment in the Oval Office to that sit-down at Pope Francis's funeral, you remember, in the Vatican, when it was much warmer, and you got a sense that, well, maybe they had turned this around. was far from guaranteed in the wake of that meeting, and has improved enormously since then, to the point where you have President Trump, coming into this meeting saying that, well, I have a bigger beef now with Putin to some degree than I have with the Ukrainian president.
Yeah,
not the case before.
That was definitely very uncomfortable, and I know that the President Trump and Vice President Vance's domestic political opponents faulted them for how they treated Zelensky, an ally. His country is the victim in all this. Mm-hmm. But I too also heard from Ukrainians, pro-Zelensky Ukrainians, who thought that he handled it horribly, that he walked right into a trap. And did everything that he should not have done when he should have behaved differently. But I guess everybody's hoping that's water under the bridge. Jim, let me ask you, after the Trump-Putin summit, after what we're sitting through right now, President Zelensky and the French President Macron have agreed to meet. We've seen Zelensky travel to Germany in recent weeks and to the UK just in the last week to shore up support. How are Europeans taking Zelensky's exclusion from this summit? Not
well, right? And that's why you're seeing those deliberate meetings. Macron saying, I'm going to talk to this guy, right? We're backing you. Merz meeting with him. And same from Zelensky's perspective to say, I want to consult with my European allies to make sure they're still going to back me if this meeting doesn't go the way that I want, or if that I'm asked to do or concede more than I, as Ukraine's leader, wants to do. So that's a deliberate shoring up. I will say I reached out to both a senior Ukrainian official and senior European official just in the last hour for their reaction to this no longer being a one-on-one Trump-Putin meeting, but having other of Trump's advisors in there, and including Marco Rubio, something of a Russia hawk. Yeah, both of them said they welcome it, and one of them said, in particular, he's happy that Marco Rubio is there because they feel that Rubio more reliably will represent Ukraine's and Europe's interests in that meeting than might have been the case had Trump been alone. Another exclusion of a sort is President Trump's special envoy to Ukraine, retired General Keith Kellogg. He's not here. We're told that one of the reasons is that some people thought that would be counterproductive. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think what's fascinating is actually we've started to see Keith Kellogg be excluded from a number of these meetings. I mean, what you've seen in the Trump administration that has happened on every front is that people's roles have expanded or shrunk depending on who they are. And you see people with a number of different roles. So, for example, you saw Steve Witkoff, who is technically the Middle East envoy, meeting with Vladimir Putin. Trump has tapped him to do that. He has an expanded portfolio. This is not someone who comes from the world of foreign policy, but he's sitting in that meeting. Right. Marco Rubio now has taken on the role of the head of the NSC. Obviously, Mike Walls departed, and the head of as a Secretary of State. He is surrounding himself kind of insularly with the people that he trusts the most, and that is who he has sitting by his side here. Not even necessarily the people whose job it was to deal with Ukraine and Russia.